welcome to the fourth episode of Vinyl and Celluloid. This month's episode covers my all-time favorite band, Van Halen, and a question that has divided rock fans for more than 30 years. Who's the best lead singer? Is it Diamond David Lee Roth, who fronted the band between 1974 and 1985 and from 2012 onwards, or Sammy Hagar, the Red Rocker, who took the frontman duty between 1985 and 1996? Joining me in this debate is Steve Guadiz from California, also known as Diggin' and Pickin', a professional guitar player and rock aficionado. Welcome to the fourth episode. With us today we have Steve Guadiz. He's based in California, and he's going to offer some professional insight on the classic, or the question that has been plaguing rock fans forever, David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar. Steve, it's a pleasure to have you here. I think it would be great just to hear a bit more about you, and I know you're a professional guitar player. You also collect vinyl. So first things first, tell us a bit more about your experience. How has it been so far? What motivated you to start playing?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, Pedro. Really appreciate it. What motivated me to start playing? It actually just started with my dad having a classical guitar around the house, and one day they left me home alone, and I picked up a book and just started playing. One of my dad's books laying around the house, and by the time they got home, I was able to play them some songs. So it's been a love for the instrument ever since.
I hear that's how Steve Vai started as well, huh?
Was that it? Was that his story too? Yeah.
I'm not sure, but that's a cool story. So, what was in terms of the bands, or at least the songs that you started to play, what was your main, I would say, inspiration, or at least your the first tunes that you started to play?
The very early stuff, like learning La Bamba. That was one of the early ones. And then what really was a big change for me in becoming starting to find my own music was when MTV ran a marathon of the Monkees. It just completely blew my mind, and I wanted to play guitar like them and have and be zany and funny like them. So that was a really big turning point. And then of course the invasion of hair metal on MTV, that was a big turning point for me, and wanting to just further my guitar playing.
Great. And basically, and then you started actually playing on a professional basis, let's call it like that. So you had some live gigs. You had your own band, or
Yeah, well, in high school and in college, I was playing in bands. Just really just more local stuff. It was never something that I really intended to do a whole lot with, and until actually more after college. Then I actually went on to do some gigging around LA, and then recorded a couple CDs with some bands. Yeah, so that's, yeah.
Make sure to send me the link so I can post it on the post, and people can further check out your albums.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
That sounds cool. So, and collecting vinyl, has it been something I assume you've been doing for some time now? I'm relatively new to the scene. I've been collecting for about 4 years. But I guess you started earlier than that, and obviously you have a massive collection. Is that the right assumption?
Yeah, I have, I'm not too far off from you. I have like probably close to 400 maybe albums. Kind of what I talked about when I started playing guitar and listening to music, that was what I first listened on, but that was also kind of the transition period when things were going, more toward tape and CD in the late 80s, and so probably it's just been within the last 2 years about that I've really just gotten back into vinyl. It kind of started with, hey, it would be cool to just have my a small collection of my 10 desert island albums on vinyl. Then it just it took on a life of its own from there. Yeah.
Yeah, it usually starts like that. I found myself saying, okay, I'm just going to buy this one because it's the one that I really wanted to have. And then, ooh, but that one also sounds cool, and the cover is amazing. And then, well, you end up with a massive collection and spending tons of money. It's not a cheap hobby if you go for some of the classics or some of the latest releases. So that's really cool. I mean, now that you mention it, before we jump into the key question, I what are your top 10 desert island albums?
Gosh, I don't necessarily have an order, but I'll tell you some stuff that's on there. Definitely A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races by Queen. Three Sides to Every Story by Extreme. And I'd probably put Porn and Graffiti in there as well. Something we'll probably talk about today, 5150 by Van Halen. Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. Abbey Road by the Beatles. Hope I'm not missing. Yeah.
No. I'm not counting. I'm not counting. But all great choices, and it's very interesting because since our subject today is David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar, you actually touch on Gary Sharon quite a bit, huh?
You know, that's another topic, right? But yeah.
That's for a whole different episode, man. For a whole different episode. Although I have to say, I agree with your selection. I would probably, well, there's an overlap there of around 4 to 5 albums. It's interesting because I think, I don't know, growing up I was really into, the zany 80s and 90s action movies, and one of the series that actually caught my attention, not only because of the story, but also because of the soundtrack, was actually Lethal Weapon with Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. And it's amazing, like obviously the first album or the first movie featured only a song by Honeymoon Suite, but then they started to involve Elton John, Sting, George Harrison, and actually the fourth movie features a song by Van Halen with Gary Sharon. I don't recall if it was I'm on Fire or something from Van Halen 3, and it was well, actually that song kind of caught my attention and led me to explore a bit more the album, not the forgotten album, but the one everybody chooses to sort of ignore.
Yeah, the Van Halen 3 album, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, today the key question is, and obviously with a pro like you, there's no denying that Eddie Van Halen. Well, some people claim he saved rock in the late '70s. I'm partial to that opinion. I think a lot of good stuff was happening, but Van Halen 1 was definitely groundbreaking. Your thoughts on Van Halen as Eddie Van Halen as a guitar player?
Man, I mean, I can't say that I was there when Van Halen 1 came out because when was it released? 77? 78. Well, I guess I was there, but I was 1 year old. I was born in 77. But I can just imagine being a player around that time. And wow, I mean, he just completely changed the game, man. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, just, and I grew up reading a bunch of guitar magazines too, and just reading a lot of these guys talking about what their reaction was when they first heard Eruption. Like they didn't even know that it was a guitar they were listening to on the tapping part. Just absolutely changed the game. There's so much fire on that first album. It's incredible.
I completely agree, and I have to say, I've spoken with a lot of members of the boomer generation who were really into prog rock back then, and even they surrendered themselves to Eddie Van Halen, and especially Van Halen 1, but they claimed that immediately after that it went commercial pop, and I mean they are really hardcore when it comes to prog rock being above everything else. So obviously they will concede in Appetite for Destruction and Van Halen 1, but that's about it. Then they go back to their own comfort zone, if you will. Which is quite interesting. And again, I think that part of that, the appeal was not only Eddie Van Halen, but also the fact that David Lee Roth brought a bit of the party vibe and the California approach to their sound. I mean, they used to play in parties, and then they got their first album out, and obviously people were immediately captured by what was, I believe, one of the best frontmen or showmen in the business. I'm not afraid to put him up there with close to Freddie Mercury and Mick Jagger. But again, people they always consider him the funny clown, and Eddie Van Halen to be the eternal number two, either after Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix. So it's interesting. But I think, and again, this is my personal opinion, that the two of them, or at least the vibes that came from Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth, were a bit of a combo, right? You wouldn't be having one without the other.
Oh, for sure. I mean, whatever Eddie wrote and came up with was, went along with Roth's vibe, with his cool kind of used car salesman cheesy thing going on. But yeah, he absolutely had had charisma about him, and that personality just comes through.
Yep. I've seen a couple of his interviews in the '80s, and it's pretty much, wow, I can't believe this is actually a thing, or somebody would say this. And I even read Crazy from the Heat, and I was a bit, okay, it's David Lee Roth, it's Diamond Dave, so you take it with a pinch of salt, but it's all about top 10 or top 40 reasons why I'm so great, and you're not, by David Lee Roth. That's my take on the book, although it was a very enjoyable read. There was a quote that stuck with me, but with time I forgot about it, and I have to reread the book because honestly I can't really recall it, and I can't find it, so I need to go back to it. But it's, that faux philosophy that he always had, and I don't know, that bar type of arguments or approach to Zen life. It was around that area. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a firm Diamond Dave. I'm on Team Dave, and I wouldn't. Well, I would love to see Van Halen, but obviously with David Lee Roth, I've never had the chance. The only time they played in Portugal, I was 4 years old, and it was in '95. So they were playing with Sammy Hagar and actually opening for Bon Jovi. So they weren't even the headliners. It was a massive tour they did around Europe. So my family actually went to see them, but I think they were a bit put off because the band so three bands, right? The band that opened was Ugly Kid Joe, and for my parents and my uncle's generation, it was a bit, whoa man, too extreme, huh? So they actually, I don't know if they stuck around to see the whole Van Halen thing, because they all went to see Bon Jovi, which was massive in Portugal, and I guess all over Europe. You think about, okay, glam metal or 80s rock, and people go, oh yeah, you have Europe, Bon Jovi, and Guns N' Roses, and that's it. Here.
Dude, so you were born around the time of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge.
Yes, and it's very interesting because it's actually the only Van Hagar album that I own.
Okay.
And I do enjoy it, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
And that's the one I want too.
It's I mean, definitely have a lot to say about that album.
Yeah.
I mean, regarding Roth, I see during his era and during the six albums, during his first stay with the band, there was a meteoric rise from Van Halen 1, which charted on 19th position, up until 1984, which was obviously number 2 and yielded Jump as their number 1 single. So a lot of the work was done, or a lot of the shaping of what Van Halen is with audiences, it was done during the Roth era, right? So, and definitely, although, yeah, Van Halen 2 is a bit too poppy for my taste, and I do enjoy the somber tunes of Women and Children First and Fair Warning, and yes, I do enjoy Diver Down. I think that's Diamond Dave's hand through and through, right? You have tons of covers, you have Motown tributes, and that's it. I think it was pretty much up to him, the reason why that album is not very well received, but it's pure Roth. And I mean, obviously 1984 was the game changer, the album that cemented them, and I really love the album, and I start to see a bit of what impacted the Hagar era there, right? So the synth driven I'll Wait, and even Jump were a bit more towards Hagar than Roth. I mean, back to
Yeah.
the first six albums. Preferences, your take, favorite songs.
I mean, I would definitely have to say was Van Halen one as far as from the Roth era. I had a guitar teacher. We'll probably get to there, but my first real introduction to Van Halen was um, the 5150 years, and then my guitar teacher was like, "Wait a minute, you've never listened to Van Halen one?" And he took me and we went through that whole album. He taught me song by song, and yeah, that was, I mean, just to learn everything from Feel Your Love Tonight, and still Eruption to this day is a challenge, but it's a man. I mean, just to imagine nothing like that, was around before it. Um, yeah, Atomic Punk. That's just great stuff. So yeah, so that Van Halen one, does it for me for the. I can just listen to that, and it probably has to do with that time, and as far as like just developing as a guitar player, and my teacher taking me through that whole album.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, my first contact with Van Halen was obviously through Panama and Jump in the
Yeah.
early 2000s. So I was immediately taken by the Roth era. But even
Yeah.
before I was the fan that I am today, I listened to a couple of. I think it was "I Can't Stop Loving You" from Balance 95's Balance, and I was immediately I
Yeah.
wasn't even aware of Sammy Hagar. Well, I was aware he existed. I wasn't aware he fronted Van Halen. So when I
Yeah.
first heard it, I was like, "Wait, this is not David Lee Roth." And that's kind of like the shape or the mindset that has populated my opinion ever since then. But
Yeah.
and I mean, it's not by any means it's not a great album, but again, it is what it is. It just was the first reaction. And I think that, I mean, when we look at the Van Hagar era, obviously four number one albums, but I mean, my take on it is that there's very little, and I'm gonna challenge you on this and question you about your take on this, but it has very little to do with Sammy Hagar, because I think it was a joint combination of having a brand that was established, that was the Van Halen brand, a change in sound, which or tastes that was more aligned with the pop scene at the time,
Yeah.
and you especially see that in 5150. Basically, it became closer to Foreigner and even. Well, the other bands, REO Speedwagon. I mean, you see the change in their sound during the '80s, and I think it
Right.
was pretty much okay. This is what everybody else is doing, and Jump was sort of a dry run. Now we're gonna do a complete album based on this. And I mean, what's your take on it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, like you say, a lot of guys took that turn in the '80s, right? Like Queen went to like a synth pop sound, and a lot of bands did that, right? Um, but your question was, as far as
The Sammy Hagar influence on the string or the four number one album string that they had.
yeah, I mean, the influence, just like you talked about, Eddie writing for what Roth could do, you know, Eddie writing for what Sammy could do with his voice, absolutely, changed what was possible with his songwriting as well, right? I mean, gosh, I mean, you have songs like Dreams and 5150, like they're just very melodic. The high pitched soaring vocal that Sammy can do. Those are, man, I love those songs. um, they just that capability of Sammy is just what let Eddie be able to write in that vein. Yeah.
I completely agree, and I mean we're talking about. I mean the question is a bit distorted because you need to take
Yeah.
into account tons of variables like we are doing right now, and you're absolutely right. I mean Sammy Hagar is a singer, David Lee Roth is a showman.
that's the crux. So that's what everyone kind of tends to say what it comes down to between the guys, But yeah, yeah,
But again, yeah, writing for Sammy Hagar was a completely different experience and allowed him to explore different avenues. My take is that when you look at Hagar's career, either solo or with Montrose or even at HSAS, I mean, none of them were massive hits, and even during his Van Halen years, when he released "Never Say Goodbye" or "Never Said Goodbye" in '87, it failed to chart even in the top 10, right? So that says a lot about okay, David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar, and his influence over what Van Halen did.
on his own, yeah, yeah, yeah.
We can explore solo careers in a bit, but again, that's obviously my take on it. And you were talking about for an lawful carnal knowledge. I mean. I have to say that's it's a very good album, and I respect the album for first. I love tons of songs in that album. Even right now, yes, I admit it may be very cheesy, but I do enjoy it quite a lot. But again, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge was released at a time where the audiences and the general public taste was changing and evolving, and obviously Van Halen released something that was closer to what they did during the Roth era than all the other three albums released during Sammy Hagar's tenure, right? So for me, that album is very rock driven, and that's why it's so good, and it's closer to original Van Halen than Van Hagar. But I'd love to hear your take on the album.
Yeah, I mean, like what you said too, just a return to the rock. I mean, his tone on that album, his guitar tone on that album is huge, and just going back to what we were talking about earlier, just how Eddie changed the game. I mean, just as a guitar player, just tone wise, he changed what was possible as well. But yeah, I mean, guitar playing on Pound Cake and it's definitely a return to their hard rock roots.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I for one, I think the other question is we established that showman versus singer approach, but I mean, I was never fortunate enough to see the band live with either of the two lead singers. But again, in terms of live performance, I've seen the YouTube videos and I've seen Right Here, Right Now live. I mean, what's your take on live performance? I mean, as a whole, I mean, who would win?
I think it's a little unfair to say that Roth is just a showman. I think if it was just that, the songs wouldn't have held up the way that they have, from his era. I mean, he's got that groove, that swagger that just comes through in his vocal on the albums, and obviously that matches his stage persona. But yeah, so I think it's unfair to just say he's just purely a showman, and he's got that trademark unique scream that he has.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And the question was again, like, who would win?
No. I mean, it's very narrow, especially coming from a Roth fan. But I don't want to put it as black and white as this. I obviously think there's a lot of merit in David Lee Roth, and but the merits go a bit beyond his vocal range. And I completely agree with you. It's not who would win. Maybe that was a bit harsh to put it like that. But again, I think that. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, if he was that untalented, the songs wouldn't have held up. But I've seen some of his recent performances, like 3 years ago, and I mean, Sammy Hagar can still do it.
Oh man, and the guy is what, 71 years old or something now?
Yeah, I don't know, but he's probably 70 something. But he's still, like, he put out a new album last week, I think, with his new supergroup.
Oh, okay, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. Actually, going back to the question about being live performance. Gosh, but I think one of the very first live concerts I watched, which back then it was on VHS. My cousin and I rented it from Blockbuster Video. Was Van Halen's Live Without a Net. And so again, that probably plays a lot into my preference being a Sammy guy. Was just yeah, it was just during my formative time, and we can talk a little bit about that later, just about when it entered your life, and you know, just yeah, the images of that, and yeah, I mean, obviously watching Sammy back then and watching stuff of Sammy now, I mean, he's so consistent live. That voice is still, it's just he's so consistent. He's on. He's in tune. He's great. So, but yeah,
You also managed to steal Van Halen's secret weapon, Michael Anthony, which I believe adds that additional value to his songs. I mean, he's great in back vocals, and the only thing you can help but wonder, what would it be like to have a song actually sung by Michael Anthony
by himself, huh? Yeah. Have you seen the video of the years that they were touring with Sharon, and during a verse of "Why Can't This Be Love," I think Michael Anthony takes a snippet, and then Eddie takes a snippet as well.
Yeah, Eddie Van Halen singing. I don't know. I have strong feelings about that one, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. No.
There's a reason he plays guitar more.
Stick to what you do, man. Stick to what you do. No. I completely agree in terms of his vocal range and also the harmony that Michael Anthony brought, and I believe that's what probably was missing from the most recent tours. I mean, I think the key question, or one of the key questions here, would be you mentioned 5150, and obviously that had a very big impact during your formative years. But at the same time, in the very same year, David Lee Roth released Eat 'Em and Smile, which, my opinion, is the greatest Van Halen album Van Halen never recorded. I mean, he got a massive supergroup, and he did very well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on both albums, actually.
Yeah, my goodness. That's a funny point. The greatest Van Halen album that Van Halen never that he's not on, actually. Yeah, I mean, introducing the world to those monster players of Vi and Billy Sheehan. My gosh, that's in two like totally like virtuoso players, and for a musician, it's just wow. I mean, hearing them do these intricate synced up lines together, and like on Yankee Rose, Shy Boy, it's just that's crazy stuff, But again, so going back to, you said between 5150 and yeah, what holds up for me, and I as a music fan, and what my preferences are, as much as I love hard rock and great virtuoso rock playing like that's on Eat 'Em and Smile, like I'm a sucker for hard rock ballads and strong melody, which 5150 has in spades, with Why Can't This Be Love, and they've got the uplifting songs of Dreams, and and so that's where my preferences lie, and that's just over time that album just holds up better for me, versus
I completely get your point. For me, actually, Eat 'Em and Smile would, well, sort of wins in terms of my preferences, because I can actually, for an awful cardinal knowledge, I can listen to it from the beginning to the end, and that's completely great. I have a good time. OU812, it's quite good, and I tend to prefer OU812 to actually 5150, because I mean, I don't know, it's like Finish What You Started. It's kind of like a really great song from the Hagar era, and I don't know, even Summer Nights from 5150, it's kind of like, okay, this is, I can see why this was popular back then, but now it's not really doing it for me. But again, I'm a sucker for ballads as well. But I just don't. I never associated Van Halen with that kind of sound. And even for example, I believe that the songs they recorded for the soundtrack of the movie Twister in '96. I mean, Humans Being is fantastic, and again, it's that edgy, raw sound that you'd say, okay, yeah, it has Sammy Hagar, but I don't care. It's a really good track, right? And that's what I think of when I think about Van Halen, not necessarily the other sound that we just mentioned. But but you spoke about something earlier before, and I completely agree with you, which is consistency. And again, during the Hagar years, you have that consistency. Even if the sound changes a bit, you do have that consistency. I think, well, David Lee Roth did an amazing job with A Little Ain't Enough. Skyscraper, a bit too experimental for my taste. But I think they're pure Roth, right? They're what he's all about taking influences from different sounds, different countries, different eras altogether, and just mashing them all up into an album. And that's at least why I think there's merit there. Whereas Sammy Hagar, okay, fine, he's consistent, but it's a very similar sound. Would you disagree or agree with this point?
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Sammy's got his thing, but yeah, Dave kind of just pulls from the stuff that he finds, entertaining, and everything from his like kind of vaudeville kind of shtick to his his stuff. His stuff with dance music, right? Yeah. I mean, have you heard him mention in interviews how much he loves Kool and the Gang? Right? I mean, yeah.
I'm not surprised. He does have a very eclectic taste and takes things from pretty much everywhere. I just I feel that obviously he was I wouldn't say a victim of the circumstances, but his sound post 1991 doesn't really hold up, and some of the material like in Diamond Dave and even Your Filthy Little Mouth, they're okay albums, but they're not the ones where I go, oh, I really need to own this or have this in my collection. Whereas I like the zany and crazy and wild EP he released in '85, Crazy from the Hit, which was, I mean, it's fun, but again, it just shows that he's in it just to have a good time, and that's pretty much it.
That's the one where he's in the water, right?
Yes, with the Beach Boys, the California Girls cover, and Just a Gigolo by Louis Prima, and yeah, it's a very basic album, and I mean, he wanted to actually make a movie, which, wow, okay, I can only help but wonder what would that look like. But I think after Prince did Purple Rain, everybody thought, yeah, I can pull that off. But then Prince did his follow-up Under Cherry Moon, which tanked, and I guess that sort of put all the other projects by lead singers from the '80s on hold. That's my theory, at least.
Yeah, real quick, Pedro, you mentioned the post 91 years of Roth. I studied with a guitar teacher by the name of Terry Kilgore, who was actually his guitar player on, I think it's called Your Filthy Little Mouth. Yeah, he's on. Yeah, that's my guitar teacher on that album. Wow. Yeah, it was after that. I was studying with him before he got that gig, and then I found out that he got that gig, and that was awesome. I was so happy for him. He was a local. Because I'm in Southern California near Pasadena, which, that's where the guys are from. And he grew up playing with them in the local scene. And I think him and Roth went, way back, I don't know, to like high school days together. And yeah, so he ended up playing with Roth on that album.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a good album. It basically it has one of the best covers of nightlife that I've ever heard, and that's saying a lot considering I'm a massive Joe Bonamassa fan and I really enjoy his cover. But I mean, that album just goes all over the place. Hip hop, funk, and it's kind of like, was David Lee Roth actually in the studio when this was recorded? It's I mean, you can't help but wonder. But it's interesting. You mentioned like how diverse the his band members were. I mean, you look at Jason Becker, who unfortunately, well, he recorded 91's A Little Ain't Enough, and he was massive. I mean, he was replacing Steve Vai. But obviously he was very talented, and unfortunately due to his health condition he couldn't perform anymore.
What a
But
story, that guy. Yeah. What a story to that guy, Jason Becker. Yeah, that's yeah, sad and inspiring at the same time. Yeah.
absolutely, and I mean that's why I guess I really love that album, not because of the story, but also I really love the cool vibe because it's 91, but Roth lives in his own bubble. I don't care about grunge. I'm doing this. Whereas recently I read that Sammy Hagar was actually felt intimidated by Soundgarden or a grunge era band, and he was like intimidated by their sound and how they were taking over. So he invited them to open for their 91 tour. Okay, fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never heard that. Yeah.
I mean, that's Sammy, right? He's very down to earth, but you would never hear Roth admitting he was intimidated by anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, did your guitar teacher actually share any stories about his time with playing with David Lee Roth?
I didn't really get to talk to him much after that. I basically once I found out, I gave him a call to congratulate him on it. But no, I haven't really heard him tell me any stories about it. In fact, as you just called me about doing this podcast, I think he did a pretty recent interview, so I'm about to go and listen to that. I'll share it with you. I'll share it with you after this.
I
Yeah.
definitely do because I'm always trying to find new material to read on the band, whilst they don't release a new album or a massive world tour that allows me to see them. But yeah, definitely do, please.
Man, you were just mentioning that the change of things over to grunge. I think when that album came out, I wanted to support my old teacher and buy the album, but I don't think I could even find it in stores. It was such a change, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In that time. So
I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. I guess that's the Roth being stubborn. You see Van Halen at least keeping up with the times and balance. I mean, I'm not saying that they went the way other bands at the time did, like Cinderella and the sort, but definitely Balance has a grungier sound or a heavier sound that's miles away from 91's For an Awful Carnal Knowledge, and definitely quite unique. But yeah, I believe that back then even the tour supporting Little Ain't Enough was actually scaled back from massive arenas to smaller venues because guess what? People aren't into that anymore.
Stuff wasn't selling, right? Yeah.
It's very difficult. I mean, I tried to, just from a curiosity or a collector's perspective, to actually try and, get a price estimate on how much would Your Filthy Little Mouth vinyl would cost me. Because, I mean, A Little Ain't Enough was somewhat easy to find, and not expensive at all. Your Filthy Little Mouth, I mean, I saw that vinyl going for $200, and I figured, well, Roth, sorry, no deal, man, no deal. Which is, I mean, yeah, but I guess it's not only the number of prints, but also the era. I mean, vinyl wasn't a thing by '94. I mean, I struggled to find some albums from '93, and I end up paying somewhat for them. But yeah, I mean, it's not his fault actually. But yeah, and I actually, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm looking personally for a copy of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, and it's hard to find one. Not under $100.
Paid 40 for mine, and it was somebody. It's like mint condition, and I bought it via Discogs, and I think maybe it was from Germany or something. Because yeah, so I mean, just because I'm a purist, sorry, I actually bought a different kind of truth. I bought the CD when it came out, and then after becoming a vinyl collector, I actually bought the vinyl, and I was a bit skeptical. Nothing against Russia, but ordering a vinyl from Russia, from a vinyl by an American band, I was a bit skeptical. But it
Sure.
was okay. I paid $70 for it, and it was, I mean, mint condition, all good, and yeah, the collection is complete now, so it's fine.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, I actually got it, and it was a good acquisition. I mean, I don't really have a big admiration for that album. I think I may have listened to it like a couple of times, but it was more of a wow, I'm buying a brand new Van Halen album, which is something I've never
Right.
done before. Than wow, this is actually super great material, and it's a keeper, right? I don't know.
Right.
What's your take on that album?
You're talking about a different kind of truth.
Different kind of truth in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, I bought it too just because of the excitement of hey, new material. It was, let's just say I listened to it about twice, and haven't really gone back to it since. But yeah, there was some good stuff on the listen there. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I know a lot of people talk about it being just kind of recycled old material of theirs, right? Yeah.
Obviously outtakes.
Okay. Yeah.
But I honestly I cannot be very precise about the percentage of tracks that are new versus the ones that were outtakes. But again, I don't think it really makes a massive difference because at the end of the day, it's not like they were redoing Eruption or Running with the Devil. It was still brand new material.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it was all about Dave versus Sammy, but I think, I mean, there are tons of questions, and one of them would be around that unfortunate tour, the Sans Halen tour of 2002, Sam and Dave, which infamous one. But I think I would love to. I would prefer to hear thoughts on Gary Sharon, actually, who you mentioned. I mean, obviously you do enjoy Extreme, and you enjoy their work. So I mean, Van Halen 3 and the Gary Sharon era. What happened? What are your thoughts on it?
I can honestly say I've actually never really listened to the whole album. I remember watching. I guess they did come out with a video. What was the song? I forgot what it was too. And it just I was just like, okay, wow, there's Gary. Chopped his hair off, and I guess again fitting with the time, and I don't know. It just, as much as a fan I was of both, it just didn't seem like it gelled together, and but also listen, reading interviews with Gary talking about the time, and they just kind of went in and recorded it without going out and gelling as a band first, so that kind of makes sense that the chemistry wasn't quite there. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work with Extreme and things. Think he's a incredibly underrated singer. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. I do enjoy Extreme. Beyond More Than Words,
Yeah.
which is the de facto association people make when they think Extreme. Yeah, More Than Words. When I'm President, for me, it's an amazing track, one that I really enjoy. But yeah, I think it was a bit of misfortune. His sound was and his vocal range is very good, and obviously he brought something that fans hadn't experienced in 13 years back then, which was actually getting Roth and Hagar songs, or songs that weren't performed during the Hagar era, actually played.
The tops for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and more than that, I think he was the most diplomatic, or he had, at least, despite his short time with the band, I think he had I don't know, the best relationship with Eddie from all the lead singers. And if you pay close attention, I think it's an outtake, but that song, That's Why I Love You, which obviously was dropped in favor of the lesser Josephine, which is a song I really can't listen to. But I mean, when you listen to the outtakes, it sounds like it's Sammy Hagar for me, it's like, wow, this is Sammy Hagar. So obviously he, to quote or to name drop an album, he's the best of both worlds, right? He actually he delivered that, right? And so yeah, the album was not good. I think it was also, well, the times back then actually didn't make it to, or weren't favorable to such an album. But again, I also enjoy the outtakes, or the very rare outtakes they had with the lead singer they never had, Mitch Malloy.
Yeah, I found that on YouTube myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very much in line. I think the long haired and even his vocal range was closer to David Lee Roth. And I mean, I really don't know if they would be more successful, or Van Halen 3 would have been more successful had Mitch Malloy been the lead singer. Because at the end of the day, I think it would be even further, I mean, closer to home, in the sense of closer to Roth sound, but again, it would be very 80s type, you know, and I don't think in '98 that would sit very well with audiences. I don't know. What's your take on it?
Yeah, the record companies probably wouldn't have wanted that. Yeah. Probably would have told him to cut his hair as well, you know. Yeah.
Which is interesting, considering that Gary Sharon was that image he dropped that. I think it's very curious, because both him and John Corabi, who replaced Vince Neil as the lead singer of Motley Crue, there was that radical change between what they were doing before and when they joined a band that was similar to what they did before in terms of sound. But then they went a completely different direction. It's like, okay, so I'm lost.
Right. Unlike AC/DC, right? If we're going from Bond to Brian, it's keeping the same formula, just a different voice. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your take on it? I mean, I don't know. We talked a bit about it, but why do you think Van Halen 3 failed to gather some, I don't know, some popularity or even some sales?
Yeah, I think the combination of all those things, right? So just the industry environment at the time probably didn't get, you know, the support and push, you know, that it needed, as well as, you know, and I could see, you know, and agree with from what I've read of Gary's recollection of the time, is just they just didn't have time to gel together as a band, as creative artists together. So, and they gave it a one album shot, and that's it. You know, maybe it could have been, you know, a lot more, because you have that capability of the guy that could bring the harder groovy rock from their early days to, you know, and the really melodic soaring vocal, you know, from the Sammy days. So, you know, it could have been something really cool. But well, pretty much for sure, we'll never find out where that could have gone. You know, but yeah.
And I mean, to your point, I'm really not sure what influence Gary Sharon had when writing, in terms of writing songs. I mean, all the songs are credited to the group, fine. But I mean, what's the take? Was it even split between Eddie and Gary, or was it just Eddie Van Halen saying, "You do this," and that's it, that's final?
Yeah, I seem to recall that it was more like the latter, like what you said, like, you know. Yeah, Eddie kind of had his stuff, and then Gary brought to the table like his lyrics and stuff. But I think the songs were pretty much in place, and you know,
they just needed someone to do the work of a lead singer.
Yeah.
It's cool, and I think around that time, I'm pretty sure you saw this on YouTube, but when Van Halen got together with David Lee Roth at the MTV Awards in '96. I mean, it's the cringiest thing ever. You've seen it?
Oh, I watched that. I watched that as it was happening on MTV. Yeah, when you were 5 years old. But that was huge at the time, man, for sure.
But I mean, you can really see, like, when David Lee Roth goes and hugs Eddie Van Halen, it's like, oh, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Please take me out.
It was something more the fans wanted more than they did, I guess, you know, at the yeah.
And I mean, even his voice at the time, they recorded a couple of tracks for it wasn't Best of Both Worlds. It was the Van Halen Greatest Hits Volume 1 or something.
And like the black cover, right? I think, yeah, yeah.
And I think the two tracks, one of them, I think Me Wise Magic, it's good. I like it. The other one, Can't Get This Stuff No More. It's just a bit too much. But there was that. I mean, it's an odd period because Roth's voice sounds like something. Yeah, this could work in a new album. But I think it was a missed opportunity, and I believe had they recorded a different kind of truth back then, it would have actually brought or resulted in a massive impact as opposed to releasing that album in 2012.
Yeah. Gosh, that was a lot of time between that, huh?
Yeah. I mean, then they did the whole tour with Sammy Hagar, and they recorded a couple of songs in 2004. But that's it. They were quite dormant between 98 and, I guess, 2012.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, I don't know. You mentioned the formative years and obviously the impact that Hagar had. Was it basically the MTV era, and that's what made people aware and actually like the Van Hagar times, or what was it like back then? I mean, to experience that new lead singer and getting exposure to that band.
I mean, gosh, speaking as a 41-year-old guy now, just in retrospect, really looking back at how much MTV formed my taste in music. Yeah, I mean, just with what was there, and right around the time when I was getting into my own music, which about 86, 87, that's when 5150 was huge, right? So I was, I'd see the videos of, I think they would play the footage from Live Without a Net for Best of Both Worlds, and that's the Van Halen that I knew. I think I had small I'd seen images of Roth flying across the stage in Panama, and of course Jump, but I don't know that I even realized they were the same band. But yeah, and so that was really the Van Halen that I knew until I started to go back, and with the influence of my guitar teacher. But yeah, I think there's something about the very first incarnation that you're familiar with. I mean, you're in a unique place that both had already kind of passed with their major work, and then so you could kind of see it as a whole. Versus, I was more of like, Hagar was what I was introduced to. Then I went back to Roth. I can only imagine what it was like, with as huge as Van Halen were, to be a fan, and then all of a sudden there's this new, completely different looking, completely different singing guy with this new sound. I may have fallen off as a Van Halen fan myself, but
I mean, although I didn't experience it, I spoke obviously with tons of people who did, and it's really interesting because, especially in Portugal where I'm from, so Roth was easily dismissed, but then again, everybody was a bit snobbish about music tastes back then, I guess. But it was dismissed, and it was pretty much teenagers or teenage girls would have his poster in the bedroom, but that's as far as it goes. And they may buy an album here and there, but it's not that massive thing. Whereas I think during the Hagar years, I never heard any specific feedback, but considering that was the only time they played extensively in Europe, it was with Sammy Hagar, and also every time I go crate digging, or I used to go crate digging back in Portugal, it's insane because the amount of times you bump into a Why Can't This Be Love single, it's insane. So that means that it was in heavy circulation. I mean, tons of copies were issued, or they existed. Whereas finding Van Halen during the Roth era, it's kind of a detective work. I managed to get Eat 'Em and Smile, and I spoke that back then. I used to buy directly from directly from the people, as opposed to platform like Discogs. And you have the whole story. Oh, I bought Eat 'Em and Smile in '87, and da da da, and they go on and on. like I'm doing now. But but you get the story. But it doesn't sound like it was very popular. And I mean, I bought. I think it was look what the cat dragged in by Poison from that same guy. And he was like, "Oh, I see your taste and whatnot." And yeah, but it's not. It's interesting to see that he wasn't what you would consider mainstream, despite both bands being quite mainstream elsewhere, right? So, but the Hagar years seem to be the years of like their biggest popularity. And again, back to what we discussed in the beginning, maybe it was because Van Halen made a name through Roth, and most likely because of Eddie Van Halen actually playing on Michael Jackson's Thriller and I guess Jump. And then people said, okay, this is new. I'm not going to bother to look what they did before. I want to know what they're doing next. And next, well, Sammy Hagar, right?
Right, yeah.
So that's it. But I would love to hear your thoughts also on Sammy Hagar and his different projects. I mean, Chickenfoot, the first album, was definitely great. I mean, Montrose, The Circle, his solo career. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's real gems there as far as his solo career. I mean, I like stuff like Eagles Fly. Yeah, I Can't Drive 55, which I for a long time I thought was a Van Halen song. I guess because I think they performed that on the Live Without a Net tour. And gosh, it spans so many years. His projects. I bought Chickenfoot. I don't. Gosh, you have fantastic musicians on that album. I don't know that any of the songs stick out as like really memorable to me. But it's a good listen. I just I haven't gone back to it so much only because I guess there was no songs that really like stuck out as like one that really speaks to me. But yeah, I think I'll listen more to his like those tracks I mentioned, his kind of pre Van Halen solo stuff. I just bought it. I haven't actually listened to it yet. The album that he did with Neil Schon, the Journey, HSAS, yeah.
It's a great album.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to listening to it, and it is incredible too to see how many projects Sammy's been involved with. From Montrose to solo to Van Halen to Chickenfoot.
Yeah, and all the other minor projects he has playing in Cabo San Lucas and whatnot. It's amazing. And again, like I said, I'm Roth through and through. I love his solo career, but I do enjoy Sammy Hagar and his career. I mean, I own Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the soundtrack. I own Heavy Metal, the soundtrack to the movie, and obviously he contributed to that. Even The Girl Gets Around, a song that it's quite obscure within the Footloose catalog. It's quite nice. And No Shame in My Game, Two Sides of Love is one of the best ballads I've ever listened to. But yeah, I mean, he... and that's the thing. I mean, when you look at his solo career, and even I Can't Drive 55, whilst other bands, and even U2 back then, were already dealing with the social commentary, which Van Halen during the Hagar years did, like in Dream Another Dream and whatnot. No, The Dream Is Over, sorry. I was listening to that song before, so that's why I was listening to the lyrics. I mean, he used to have a similar approach as David Lee Roth in terms of, yeah, this is what I do, and it is what it is, but then he also became a bit more political or with a bit of social commentary when it came to his songwriting. And I think that's kind of like where he sort of loses me.
Yeah. I don't know. One of the knocks on Sammy that I read a lot is that his lyrics tend to be on the cheesier side. or yeah, not so deep, I guess, or maybe more obvious rhymes and stuff like that.
Come on, you're telling me that Gift to Live is not a beautiful anthem about active life, and I can't believe you.
Just one thought that when you brought up Mitch Malloy and things that could have been, and I might have put a post on this on my Instagram page. Did you know that Eddie Van Halen asked Patti Smith of Scandal?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
wow, it shows you, where his musical thoughts were at the time, and I don't think there's any demo that exists, but
That's bad.
Not that I know of, and trust me, I did. I tried to do my homework in that area, but
Yeah.
nothing ever surfaced. I think they must have burned it because it was not very good. But it's
Yeah.
interesting you mentioned that. I actually own Scandal's. I think the only album they ever released, like The Warrior, right? And
Uh-huh.
it's quite good. Although I'm not trying to come up with a macho attitude. I don't see a female lead singer for Van Halen, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Lita Ford. Maybe Lita Ford would be a great lead singer for Van Halen. So I stand corrected, but
Yeah.
not Patti
Yeah.
Smith. I don't think Patti Smith would do the trick.
Right. Yeah. I own. Yeah. I own the Warrior, and then I think they did another EP that has that one of their hits, "Goodbye to You."
Hmm.
Really cool song, but and she's a good singer in her own right. But gosh, when I listen to her, I cannot imagine a place where
Yeah,
would go anything with what I know about Eddie Van Halen and his work. But
yeah.
who knows? Yeah.
I think now that you mention not only rumors, but all those people that were associated with, or the performers that were associated with Van Halen. Do you really buy the story that Eddie Van Halen, tried to join Kiss? I know that it was Gene Simmons that supposedly found them and whatnot, but what's your take on that story?
Wow. Yeah, I'm remembering reading something about that. And this was it immediately after Ace that I don't know.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
it.
do I buy it whether it was real or not?
Yeah. I mean, it's not whether it's real or not. I don't believe it was actually that explicit in terms of, hey,
Right.
Gene, can I join your band, please? No.
Yeah.
But do you believe? I mean, is it possible that there was that we almost had Kiss with Eddie Van Halen?
I don't think so. I would just think that's something because he kind of said in passing.
Yeah, probably.
If he said it,
He had
I
one
think
too many. He said, "I'm fed up with Dave. I need a new band," and that's it.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
he's too much of his own artist to join something like that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of whether it has to do with his playing or his musical equipment, but there's a lot of people that kind of find his stories sort of revisionist history.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But
But I think
either way, huge respect for the guy. But yeah.
exactly. No, exactly, and I think that's what happened when you read some of the books. I mean, I read the Van Halen book that came out last year by I don't really recall the author, but basically it covers the Roth era, and yeah, there is revisionism everywhere.
Yeah.
I take everything with a pinch of salt, and yes, sure, that happened, whatever you say. But
Right.
I guess that's what happens with all the groups and all the similar books that cover those topics. Even
Right.
The Dirt, a book that I really enjoyed. Again, most of it I'm still a bit not sure that happened exactly like it did, but
Right.
hey man, you do you, huh? That's what I say.
They gotta sell books, keep it entertaining.
They got to sell
Yeah,
books, yeah. I mean, and again, do you think? I mean, I was very disappointed with the movie The Dirt. I think that now we're entering a new trend that's started with Bohemian Rhapsody, a movie that I enjoyed but didn't think it was that good. I mean, Rocket Man, I may go and watch it, but I'm
Yeah.
not completely sold yet. Van Halen movie, yes or no?
Why not?
Why not? Why not, indeed. And
Why not? Yeah.
who would play
Yeah.
David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar?
Excuse me?
Who would be your choice to play David Lee Roth, and who would be your choice to play Sammy Hagar?
Oh my god. That's
I put you on the spot there, huh? I don't have the answer myself, but
I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
yeesh, I don't know. I mean, had the movie been made a couple of years ago, I would have thought of Val Kilmer based on his awesome performance as Jim Morrison. But right now, I think they would have to go with someone unknown. Maybe Matthew McConaughey would be a good Dave or Sam? I'm not sure. Maybe Dave.
Yeah, it would have to be them in their older years, I guess.
Yeah, or they had to use the magic that they're using now for the new Scorsese
Right.
movie of
They
making
make
him
their
look young.
faces look extra smooth.
Yeah, yeah.
Take the wrinkles away.
Yep, yep. I don't know. But I don't know. I think if you're gonna adapt everything, once they do Guns N' Roses, I think that's next.
Yeah. That could be an interesting one, and having read Slash's autobiography as well, yeah. Yeah, it's a good read actually. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd agree with you as much as, I've alluded to me being as huge of a Queen fan as I am, and as lauded as that movie was, as a story, just it wasn't fantastic. The movie, but the performance by Rami Malek, I think that's how you say this, was fantastic, of course. But yeah, tough to make a band's history an interesting movie, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the movie, and when the screening was over, I was speaking with my friends, the ones I went to see the movie with, and they were asking me, "So, what do you think? What's your take?" And I said, "Well, the editing was very bad." Well, I didn't use these exact words, but something to the effect. And the editing was very poor, and also the screenplay was quite dull. But I mean, it made. I think they had to recreate the Live Aid concert, and then okay, we need some filler stuff about Freddie Mercury. So that's how I think the movie was planned, right? So let's shoot the whole thing with Live Aid, and then we think about something else, to put it before. And I don't know your experience watching that movie, but when I went to see it, it was when it was first released, and everybody was singing during the Live Aid scene and chanting, and yeah, the whole it's not supposed to be an interactive experience, but guess what? It was.
Right on. I guess Queen brings that out in people, and then you're in London, right?
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah, and Queen's a whole another thing there, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah.
Even the streets, like Carnaby Street, was completely. They did a lot of decoration for that movie, and even now, I mean, I don't think Rocketman will do the same thing. First, because it's rated R, and people might be a bit shy about promoting a movie that's a bit more in your face when it comes to Elton John's life. But again, I also I don't know what's your take on Elton John, and again, I guess we're done with Van Halen. But I had so my English teacher was actually he's from Manchester, and back when I was studying, he used to say that he compared him to a very cheesy Portuguese performer, and he said that it was the British equivalent. Which again, it's a bit harsh, I would say, but I think Elton John is well regarded as a performer. I just don't think the movie will have the same impact, or he has the same fan base.
Yeah.
Are you planning to see it?
I likely will. Maybe it's probably one I'll wait for the streaming or DVD release for. Yeah.
We'll have to share our thoughts or exchange ideas on or takes on that movie after it's released.
Very well. Yes.
Steve,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being a guest, and hope to catch up with you again.